Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rocket Live. Thank you, everybody who's joining us right now. Thank you, Kyle Griffith, for the compliments on the music. I love it too. So get you fired up, get you going. I want to welcome my guest today, Susan Ganz, who is the Chief of Staff and Business Strategist with Ganz Strategy. How are you?
I am well, Chris. And yes, that music fired me up. So I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you and I had met actually very serendipitously at my first in-person New York networking event since March of this year. So I hadn't been in New York City since I think March 11th or 12th was my last time in New York City for an event. And it was like, 2 months ago, October, I think. We were both for a really small, really cool rooftop event. It was really safe, very neat. But it was that was my first time being back in the city. And then, you and I had met and totally hit it off and gotten to some really cool conversations, and then did a one-to-one afterwards. And eventually I was actually just on your show, your video series that you have going on called Rest. So we'll talk all about that and get into everything that you're doing. Cause I after all the conversations I've had with you, you are like a total rock star. You totally schooled me on so many different strategies and so many different ideas that I absolutely needed to have you on the show today to share with everybody what you're doing. And I know we're going to be talking about the topic today is going to be really focusing in on why it's so important to have that chief of staff or that right-hand person in your company, and how you find out and how people can work with you. So I'm going to turn it over to you, though. So tell everybody a bit about what you're doing, your background, because when you told me, I found it absolutely fascinating. So, and before we do that, if anybody out there has any questions along the way for myself or for Susan, feel free to throw them into the chat, and we will answer them as soon as we can. Or if you just want to say hi, that's fine too. So, with that, Susan, tell us all about yourself.
Thank you, Chris. So I like to say that I take business leaders and entrepreneurs on a vacation. And what I mean by that is that I'm taking them on this journey into their future state of where is it that they want to go? What's their vision for their business? What are their values? What's most important? And then we take stock of, well, where are they today in their journey? And then I take them as the right-hand person or tour guide to get them from where they are to where they want to go, and unpack the challenges that are getting in the way of achieving their initiatives. So the initiatives I'm talking about are things like growth, change, repositioning their business given the pandemic, employee engagement, because maybe some of their employees are in person and the majority are remote. Right. Even, onto the client experience. A lot of people have had to rethink the client experience. So it's those sorts of challenges that I like for people to unpack onto me. And so I can clear the way for them to focus and get their business done.
Yeah, and you have actually a really interesting background because when we first met and you were telling me all about it, I was like, whoa, it's just like list of accomplishment after accomplishment, and it's and this is why I love going out and meeting people and developing relationships, because you just learn so much about people, and it's so much that I don't know. And so when I meet someone like you, I'm like, oh my God, you're like one of the smartest people I've ever met. But I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your background, because I think it is fascinating.
Thank you. I just want to carry you in my back pocket wherever I go, because that was just a lovely introduction. So my background is that my undergraduate degree was in psychology, and I wanted to apply it to business. So I started my career working as a business doctor of sorts to CEOs, CFOs of middle market companies, and I helped them with their financing needs. And I noticed that it gets lonely at the top. So beyond the financing, these leaders were telling me about other things that were going on with their business. And I wanted to be able to make an impact on all the aspects of the business, but my mandate was only in the financing arena. So I decided that I wanted to have the ability to solve all these different problems, and decided to career change to consulting. So I went back and I got my MBA at Wharton. And while I was at Wharton, I worked at their small business development center to get my feet wet in consulting. So I worked with startup companies. I worked with existing small businesses in the Philadelphia area. And it was just so empowering to go from the classroom to be able to help make a difference in an entrepreneur's life. And so from there, I decided to join Ernst & Young in a strategy practice and corporate finance practice that they had. So I worked with selling companies. I worked on a growth strategy for a large defense company. I worked on a micro marketing strategy for a retailer. And I always wanted to know, like, what happened post merger, for example, with my companies, or what happened after I made that recommendation. I knew it would be implemented, but I didn't know exactly how it was going or what the next stage in the growth was.
Right.
So for me, it was time for my next journey. And that next journey brought me to Wall Street and technology, even without a technology background. And I was hired initially for Merrill Lynch to put together a strategy process and tools for how Merrill Lynch dealt with its main technology vendors. And from there, I got hired internally about a year later by the investment bankers to be their eyes and ears in developing technology solutions. So things like introducing BlackBerries and working on document management systems and client relationship management systems. And then I got handed this huge project to brands and automate how Merrill Lynch did its pitch books. And there are two details that you should know. One is that it had failed 8 times prior to me getting to that door, right? And the second is I had 0 technology project management experience. Right. So you could say, wow, Susan, how did you navigate that one? And so that's why I leaned on psychology, and I leaned on what I knew. And that was about asking good questions. And in my due diligence to find out, well, why did this fail 8 times? It was because the stakeholders weren't involved. And it began my journey on change management, because I had to get on board all these global constituents who were skeptical, rightfully so, including leadership. So I got my training there, and from there spent 10 years in technology management on Wall Street, 7 with Merrill, and then got recruited to Credit Suisse, and had an inflection point in 08, 09 when the markets turned, and decided I wanted to make my mark in the financial planning and advisory business, and did that for 10 years. And in the last 3 years, really, the business had changed because of some legislation, and I wasn't able to brand and market in the way that I wanted to. And so I decided to then focus on all these core strengths that I bring to the table, which is around strategy, change management, project management, and launch my own firm earlier this year, pre-pandemic.
like so many of us.
Yes.
And I appreciate you sharing all that, because I think that it's really important for everybody to know, I think, where you came from, because I also think that what I find very interesting about your story is how much you got your hands dirty. Like, you really were like in the trenches and like getting in there and like learning and really working hand in hand with people and learning, different aspects of the business and all the skill sets that you now possess. It wasn't something that you just like totally, just sat and read books on. Like, you were doing this stuff and living it and really learning like in the field. And I find all that like very fascinating and all that backstory, which is where, we are today and what you're doing. And so I think getting into it is talking about this main topic, which is, why is this important? Because I think, for a lot of people, like, and it depends where they are in their business, right? I mean, small,
Sure.
medium, large, C-suite, and you deal with a lot of executives and people on that level. But I think it's really important to think about that, because as your business grows, like, this is when you need to start putting the right people in the boxes. So whether you're already there and you're looking for someone new, and maybe you're on the fence about whether or not you need anybody, or your trajectory is going there, like, this is important stuff that you really need to begin to think about and formulate. And it's not just like, hey, picking up the call and putting someone in that seat. Like, this is basically handing someone the keys, and you got to really make sure that they're like up for that task. So let's talk a little bit about that and sort of how you help and what really that importance is.
So let me begin by, how does somebody even know that they need something like this?
Right.
And it starts from these questions. It's like these wishes. I wish I had more time in the day. I wish I could clone myself. I so regret missing that family dinner yet again.
Right.
I wish I could go on vacation, even if it's locally, or a staycation. Or I can't believe I missed that parent-teacher conference again, that performance again, that sporting event yet again.
Right.
And it's the shortage of time. Time is such a precious commodity.
You never get it back. once it's spent, it's gone.
So that's why it's crucially important for your business to succeed is, how are you allocating your time? And is your time aligned with what's important to you in life? So in your business life and your personal life, because that makes you, right, a whole person. You're not divided. Like, this is your business self and that's your personal self. You're all one person.
Right.
It gets schizophrenic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like you're just switching hats, like, I'm in this mode, and that could switch to, almost sometimes to a minute, depending on what's going on. I think, and a lot of times, with all of us working from home, it does definitely switches. If you're like, you got your kids over here and then you're doing your business here and you're just like this.
So, might ask, well, what is the chief of staff? What is this right-hand person? What
is that?
So it's someone who really keeps the business leader on point and focused on what are the key goals that they want to achieve, and also their key strengths. So it's playing to their strengths for sure. And it's about, staying away from what I'll call the bright, shiny objects.
Yeah. Which that's hard to do.
Right? Like, oh, maybe I should be thinking about this other opportunity. And you go down this rabbit hole and you're like, well, oh, wait, how come I didn't work on my big project?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Why did I get this done? I started the day wanting to get this done. I knew I could get it done, but here I am 8 hours later and it's not done. And I don't even think I touched it. So, but yeah, it's exactly it.
And so there's so many different functions that a chief of staff plays. So one of them is the keep on track of the goals, right? And helping leaders to decide, all right, what are you going to do? What do you need to delegate? And what do you need to delete? So the 3 Ds, if you will.
I like that. It's a 3 Ds. The triple D.
The triple D. And then it's about making sure that your operations are running efficiently, productively, and also to make sure that your projects are getting implemented. So it's like a third role, the implementer. And then another role is about making sure that everything gets coordinated, right, across the different functions in your business and across the organization. And it's about making sure that employees, everybody's involved in getting over the finish line and coordinating that team.
Yeah, it's like having like a traffic coordinator, like really like all this stuff that's going on, like, it's making sure that that's all happening the way it's supposed to be and on time.
Right. Exactly. And then it's also sometimes stepping in for that business leader when they can't be there, to be able to fit in the shoes, to communicate the messages that need to happen, to help make the decisions to move the ball forward if the CEO or leader is not available. And how freeing is that for the CEO to enable, to be able to step away, to go on vacation, to, say, okay, at this time tonight, I want to make sure I am out the door to go to whatever event they want to go to with their family or what have you. And then, as I mentioned in my early days of my career, I saw how, lonely it is at the top for senior leaders. So the chief of staff is also an advisor to, hold a safe space for the leadership as they unpack, some of the challenges that maybe they don't want to necessarily broadcast beyond the four walls of their office.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a really key component. I mean, you're really, I mean, they're really in there lock and step with you. So while they may not, particularly own any equity or anything like that, I mean, they are basically taking an ownership role, and that's huge, because I mean, you really have to be like the other half to keep things going, and to find that right person is not easy, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So how do you assist with that? Like, where do people even begin to like look for something like that? Is it, is the first step to talk to somebody like you and bring you in and kind of figure that out? Like, where do people start?
So it's kind of like dating, right? You have your criteria of, what it is that you want for your business. Sometimes it starts out with, I can't get to my to-do list and I'm not sure why or what's happening.
Right.
And then, they might ask a friend, or they might say, oh yeah, I heard this person who does strategy and chief of staff. Maybe I should talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I start off with, some diagnostic questions to hear, like, to understand what's going on. What are the challenges?
Right.
What's getting in the way? And then from there, determine, well, what's the scope of the work going to be,
Yeah.
and see what they need. Sometimes it's somebody who's more strategic like me. Sometimes it could be somebody who's more on the executive assistant side.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on what are the needs of the business and what are they trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that is so important, because it really does come down to too, like, what type of business are you, and how are you prepared to do this? And I think too, and also I think a lot maybe has to come down to like, how is the business structured? Like, what does the infrastructure of the business look like? Are they ready to bring this person on? And so what has to change in order to implement a role like this? And I'm sure that is definitely something where, people don't oftentimes probably even realize it.
Yes. I mean, I saw something a CEO posted recently that said, this very question, I have such ambitious plans and I need somebody to get this done. And I'm not sure even what to call this person, but I know I need a resource to get it done. And that's where it starts, where somebody says, I need this resource. I don't have this resource in house, or I need another set of hands to get the agenda done.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think that makes, perfect sense. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, I need somebody and they don't even know like what that role is or what to even call that, and it's not just a project manager, it's much more. Like, while that person does possess those skills, it's not the only part of their role is to just be the project manager on things. What types of businesses, or I guess what size business, do you typically see when they probably cross the threshold where they should start thinking about this? And because it's not for just every single business, because size does matter in this case. But what is your advice for people looking at this, and depending on where they're at or where they think they're going?
Sure. When you're first starting out, you're bootstrapping, you are wearing many hats. And that's where, you can have virtual assistants and use technologies and so forth to help you then focus on what you do best and then
Mhm.
outsource some of those more administrative tasks. I think as you start to cross the $1 million threshold, then you need that person to start to help you get what you need to get done, because the tools that got you to
Yeah.
that $1 million level are not going to be the same tools that get you to the multi-million dollar level.
Yeah, and I think that once again another great point, because that is a lot of, like, for the case of like when somebody who's in their business and they're going and they're working, and it's like, when is that point, and what is like a revenue threshold, because people will use that as like sort of the measuring stick to say, all right, now that I've hit this, like, is it the time to bring someone in to now handle some of these next level responsibilities that need to be done? Because listen, I mean, you just can't do it all yourself, and we talked earlier about it, like, it is that work life balance. I mean, it's all life, but it's like you just don't want to miss these moments because you're a slave to your job for 18 hours, 16 hours, and you're putting in like 70, 80 hour work weeks. It's just it just becomes like you just can't do it. You can't sustain that way. I mean, you may do it a bit in the beginning, but it's not a long term. There's no way. There's absolutely no way to physically and mentally sustain that for that long. So you do need to like bring in help.
Yes. Yes. And it doesn't have to be forever, right? It could be
Right.
a fractional model, right? Where you get so many hours per day, per week, per month, where you need that to help focus on your
Mhm.
key issues. And then when you're ready, you can have that full-time person.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, because I mean, a lot of times too, like, the old adage is, you hire when it hurts, because obviously payroll and everything that goes along with it, like, you just can't like be hiring. So you really have to be smart about the people you hire initially, and where it makes sense, and like, does it hurt enough, and where can the business like afford and absorb it. And then that's the things you look at, like, well, by me not hiring this person, how does that impact the business? Am I now losing productivity, and or whatever billable hours, all those different things that go into your business? Like, by not hiring this person, I'm actually hurting myself. So if I did have this person here, this asset, like, I could actually increase our productivity and performance and keep things going, and actually find that now I am more profitable. Like, I am able to make more time billable than before. And I think that's something, and that sounds like a lot too of like what you would help someone to really discover, especially if they're on a fence, or like, oh, how can I afford this, all these things. And
Exactly. I was going to say, you bring up a perfect point here, and that is, what is your time worth? So if you could get back
right
10 hours a month, what does that mean to your business? And
right
if you're really super focused on your revenue line, and somebody takes off some of the other aspects of moving projects forward, and then you could get even more revenue from not only your focus time, but these additions that you're doing, what does that mean to you? So that ROI is pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. And that's the stuff that I think oftentimes, because it's just it. When you're a business owner, you're doing so many things, and you're looking at the bottom line, and you're looking at those numbers. And a lot of times it's hard to take that zoom out view of where things are. And yes, you are running your business by the numbers and you're looking at it, but sometimes it just takes that extra look to be like, well, exactly, like, if the 10 hours or 20 hours or whatever it is a month, like, if I actually had that back, and that was now billable time where I'm struggling to find things, that's where things start to fall into place. Those are the pieces to the puzzle. And it's hard to look at that on your own without the help.
Yes, absolutely. So again,
So
it's that right
yeah,
hand.
yeah, the right hand. There you go. um, so one of the other things that you do, which I love, is you also have your own video series, and I do want to talk about that, because I was actually fortunate enough to be on your video series, and it was a wonderful experience. You ask such great questions, so I love that. Much different than this show, but it's really good. It was actually very fun. We had a great time, and I'm anxious to see how it turned out. But I've watched some of the other interviews you do, and so why don't you talk a little bit about your show and sort of what the theme is, and the types of people that you like to bring on there, not just wackos like me.
Stop. You're my like sidekick now, I think. My co-host. So I decided at the beginning of the pandemic, as I said, how can I give back? That was my question. I said, look, I'm not a doctor or a nurse, a firefighter or a police officer, but who can I be a hero to? And I started to think about the small, mid-sized businesses. I'm like, wow, they're going to really be impacted by this. And then it became, oh yes, and also the nonprofits. And how can I assist? And I said, well, I'm getting inspired by the broadcast journalists doing news from their homes. I'm seeing talk show hosts like Jimmy Fallon do shows from their home, and his daughters were climbing on him. And I realized it didn't have to be perfect was number one. And as a recovering perfectionist, that was really freeing.
I love that term. That's great.
And the second thing that was inspiring to me was, well, wait a second, I also have access to the same technology that people are using. So as long as I have an internet connection, a computer, and a video chat app, I'm good. And I have been using the Zoom platform for a few years for global work that I do. And so I had everything I needed. And then I said, I wanted to do a play on words, because I said, everybody just needs to like rest, pause a little bit. So I'm like, what can I make up here? And I was like, oh, resiliency. Oh, that's a good word. That's really fitting. And then, well, people are being empowered. So I named it Resiliency and Empowerment Seminar Today. And I have two goals with the show. One goal is to raise the visibility of the organizations whose leaders I'm profiling.
Right.
So again, those small, mid-sized businesses and the nonprofits. And the second goal is to put positive messages out there, because I particularly felt at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of negative messages, and felt that, we need some really positive, people get through this. And so it was so important for me to put that out into the world. And because we've all been resilient at one point or another in our lives, whether you've gone through things like 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, market crashes. I mean, there's so many things, loss of a loved one. We've all experienced it. So it's been so heartwarming and gratifying to be able to do the show. So there's this show that I just channeled an inner desire to be a talk show host. So this is like me living out my dream through this web show.
It's great. It's great, though. I love it.
And I've recorded over 60 so far, and probably about 50 of them are up. So more to come. But people seem to enjoy it.
Super prolific too. That is wonderful. No, and I think it's great. And I mean, we talked about this when we first met. Is very much similar. Like, I wanted to be able to do something where I could help the people in my network, people I know, and give them exposure to people in my network. I mean, it's like, I have something over 2,000 something connections here on LinkedIn, and it's like, if I could interview somebody and have them talk about who they are and what they do, and potentially expose them to all these people in my network, and they connect and maybe do business together or refer each other, whatever happens, like, hey, that's great. And so that's really my motive behind doing the show and going on and doing the whole thing. So it's we share very similar backstories on this.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you feel it too, just the impact that you're making with the business owners that you're working with. I'm sure they appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I definitely feel great doing it. I'm happy to be able to do it. I really am. And I've said this before for people who watch me do this, it is a joy for me. I really really enjoy doing it. I enjoy talking to people, and I hope the people who watch this also find value and kind of feed off our energy and find the topics that we're talking about relevant to them. So, and that's why I don't really like to just say, oh, well, I'm just industry focused. To me, it's like, listen, I want to talk to people who I think are rock stars and who help other people to become rock stars. And I think that to me is like exactly where I want to be. And that's, where I see how you fit into that too, is like you are, when I listen to everything you've done and our times talking off air, is like, I consider you definitely, very much a rock star in what you do. And you really help people in their businesses to really attain their dreams, and help them to channel like their rock star and help these businesses keep going, because these are crucial decisions, that really steer a business into getting them to the next level. And by you doing that, like, they're staying in business, they're keeping people employed, and they're growing. And so I definitely, I kudos to you for doing that, because it's a challenge, and a lot of people need that kind of help.
And, I never thought about it as a rock star before, but I'll take it.
You got to take it. You go for it. You got to wear that rock star banner, man. You got to do that. This was awesome. So, before we sign off, what is the best way for people to connect with you? I know I threw some links in the chat if anybody's watching, and eventually they'll be listening, and I'll have the notes updated with links. But for everybody right now, what's the best way to connect with you?
So the best way to connect with me is a fewfold. One, of course, is LinkedIn, and you'll see Susan Ganz of Ganz Strategic Solutions. Another is to go to my website, which is GansStrategicSolutions.com. If you want to learn more about Russ, there's a Russ tab. And then to see all of the interviews, you could go to News and Insights. And to contact me directly, you could send me an email at susan@GansStrategicSolutions.com or hello@GansStrategicSolutions.com. And Ganz is spelled Ganz.
Right. And I know, and also too, I believe the videos are on YouTube as well, right?
Yes. So my YouTube channel is also Ganz Strategic Solutions.
Yeah, and make sure when you go over to that YouTube channel, you hit the subscribe button and the little bell, because that little bell is crucial, because that's what gets you notified every time someone on YouTube drops a new video. So when Susan makes a new video, you got to hit that little bell, so that way you get that instant notification that there's a new episode to watch. But so make sure you head over there and subscribe to all that too, because it does help, believe me. So well, thank you so much, Susan, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your insight and your knowledge and experience with us all. Once again, I find it extremely fascinating, and I think what you do is very important and very vital to many people who are in that decision-making role in their business, whether the owner or CEO. It's a really important role to make sure that it's filled by the right people. So I urge everybody out there to connect with Susan and to work with her, ask her questions, because I know she's always happy to help to talk to people and give them a hand. So with that, I want to thank everybody so much for watching today, and for everybody that will be listening to this or watching the replay back on LinkedIn and YouTube and listen to the podcast. I urge you all to go over to my YouTube channel, rocketgrowthagency.com, and give that a subscribe and hit the little bell so you get notified. And also, if you are listening to this on any podcast platform, to subscribe to that as well, so that way you also get notified when I release a new episode on a podcast. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. And remember, always be authentic, be yourself, and always remember to rock it.
Thank you so much, Chris. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. Thank you.